We're going to start.
Okay. Can I just make a quick announcement? Some of you who came to our office will have seen all these nice products on the shelf, and most of these products are prepared by Hilde and her group in Sicilena, and Sarah and her group in Poliak, which is further down the south coast. But we thought to open it up, so if you're interested in any of the products, and you do have a credit card, you can buy any of those products, and we'll deliver them here tomorrow morning. You can chat to Chris, and he'll show you all the different products on his phone. You can click which ones you like, and they'll be there tomorrow morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming back. I know yesterday was a full day, and today is going to be another full day. I'm just going to do a bit of a recap to get your brains working and remind you what we did yesterday, because I know I had a glass of wine last night, and then talk you through a little bit about what we're doing today. So yesterday we had a couple of intro presentations that got us thinking about ICT and small-scale fisheries and how they might intersect. We had 4 really good case studies that provided us with some insight into several different types of tech that are being used in the sphere and that are being used to collect data, to visualize data, to use data in traceability and decision making. And then we had a really good chance to have a chat about what the implications of the tech were, what the pros were, what the cons were. And from those discussions, we had some really good overarching points and people saying, oh, but we've not talked about this, or we've not talked about that. And really luckily, today we're going to delve a little bit deeper into some of those topics with some more case studies looking at specific aspects. And then again, you're going to have some time to talk about it, both as a large group and a smaller group, to think about how we can overcome some of the challenges and include some of these things that you might not have thought about. And then after lunch, we're going to have a discussion to work out how we can keep all of these conversations and networking and all of this great group, keep it going, how we're going to keep it going, and what that might look like. The other thing is we're going to keep putting our notes on the posters and thinking about how ICTs are relevant to the FAO guidelines, and also building on our pros and cons so we can bring that all together in our final report of the conference. But the first thing we're going to do is hopefully some of you, if not all of you, have brought something that means something to you in terms of the ocean. And we're going to do a little bit of an exercise, A, to get to know people you haven't managed to talk to, and B, to just have a little bit of a grounding and remember why we're all here. So if you've got your item, the idea is that you, or if you've not brought your item, you can have a quick Google and find a picture. If you've got your item, I want everybody to stand up and move around. Get into a group of about maybe 3 or 4 with people you've not talked to. So those guys at the back need to come to the front, and the guys at the front need to go to the back. And just spend some time talking about what you've brought and what it means to you in terms of your relationship with the ocean. And then you've got about 15 minutes, and then we'll shout and we can come back and start with the more brain work.
That's hilarious, man. I'll give it all. Hey everyone!
Thank you, everybody, for humouring me with that exercise. I hope you got to listen to some interesting stories from your colleagues. Walking around, I definitely saw the whole range of different ways the ocean impacts our lives, from livelihoods, food, recreation, health, all sorts of different ways. So it's really nice to think about the ocean in this really holistic way, and I hope it's given you a little bit of a renewed vigor as to why you're here sat in this room. So we're going to go on to the main part of the day, which is of course our speakers. So our first speaker today is Roscher from WorldFish, and he's going to give us a little bit of an insight into the work he's been doing looking at ICTs on a global scale. So I'll hand over to Matt.
Thank you. Okay, so just as he's setting it up, my name is Matt Roscher. I'm here on behalf of WorldFish to talk about a project we have been conducting over the past 2 years in collaboration with FAO. The eventual output of this project will be a summary document kind of discussing the current ICT initiatives globally. And it comes a little bit more than 10 years after an initial report published by FAO discussing the same topic. And the aim of our report is essentially we want to provide governments that are looking to engage with ICTs a sort of reference framework for what's out there, and specifically how it can help achieve the objectives of FAO's voluntary guidelines and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. As a quick anecdotal note, I do think this is a perfect time slot for me to present this, in the sense that this will serve really as a summary of many of the talking points that we've heard yesterday, and what we will discuss today. So broadly, an ICT can be described as anything that captures, stores, or transmits information. In small-scale fisheries, this is typically mobile phones or mobile applications, VMSs, GPSs, etc. In fisheries and in other sectors, the uses of ICT is proliferating. So this rapid growth has really led to an ambiguity of what's out there, what is best practice, what is working in what contexts, and how governments can strategize to use ICTs. So looking at both primary and gray literature, which was relatively sparse, as well as informal Google searches, snowballing with practitioners, and just word of mouth, we were able to collate these number of ICT cases, 41. And you can see there's slow and steady growth, 2006 to 2012, and then we really take off after 2012. Kind of coincides with the availability of cheap and fast mobile technologies. Just as a reference point, 2012 is when the iPhone 5 and Android 4.0 was released. So these are, we had 3 overarching themes to frame our uses, and these coincide with FAO voluntary guidelines from Lena's presentation, part 2. These are some of the components that she looked into. So the governance, tenure, and ecological sustainability is obviously the ecological side of things. Well-being, safety, decent work, and gender equality is the social component, and value chains, etc., is the economic component. And from here, we broke the uses into 6 categories, or 2 for each theme, just to get a little bit more granularity. And there's a lot of overlap between them. They're not totally pulled apart, but again, we wanted to align this with the voluntary guidelines. So here's a quick little heat map, if you will, of what we found. You can see the uses on the y-axis and the geographical regions on the x. Asia had the most cases that we found, but given the dominance of Asia in terms of the size of the fleet and the number of people employed, this wasn't too surprising. From a use standpoint, catch data analysis and management was the most common use that we found, followed by traceability. And with traceability, we found more recently a few examples of blockchain being used, but there's caution there in the sense that this was developed as a digital, this technology was developed as a digital currency for, you know, digital goods trading hands. And it may not translate so well to tangible goods or produce changing hands. You can still put a fake barcode on a shoestring and ship it as a box of tuna. So when developing new technologies, or more likely new ways to use existing technologies, successfully navigating these challenges or opportunities can greatly increase the benefits and accessibility of the ICT initiative, such as building trust with consumers and users. And I'll touch on that more in a bit. Or taking advantage of data linkages by using an integrated platform for greater impact, barriers to affordable access in terms of cost and coverage of power networks, understanding that the regulatory environment greatly influences the accessibility, affordability, or adoption of ICTs, particularly in a least developed country context. Gender equity and a growing digital divide, we'll also touch on that in a bit. Sustainability beyond project timelines. So often technology is implemented that becomes obsolete once the intervening agency runs out of funding or leaves. And this is usually due to a lack of local applicability or unsustainable finances. Understanding that ICTs can change the way people work and interact with each other. And so to mitigate this risk, essentially is making, again, locally relevant interventions. Due to the underlying diversity and low capacity of the small-scale fisheries sector, you really have to scale your capacity development along with the technology you're looking to implement, and also the scalability diversity conundrum. And this is in the sense that to scale, it has to be lightly touched and simple so that everyone can understand it and everyone can use it or can get something from it. But at the same time, the research is saying that to be successful, you have to make locally relevant or locally designed and developed technologies, but you can't uniquely co-develop with every community you come across. Small-scale fisheries are far too diverse. So kind of finding the balance, what works, and from a multiple angles is paramount here. So one theme that came through the review is that trust really shapes the way people interact with technology. And we discussed this. This came up a lot yesterday. I think it's nice. One case study we had in southern India, there's trust issues outside of community groups and families. But these community groups were using WhatsApp already to communicate. And what happened is the fishermen were joining fishermen WhatsApp groups and sharing fishing locations or weather advisories or bait or tips, and, you know, these sort of things with each other in WhatsApp. And kind of the take-home message is ICT development must work with these pre-existing scenarios and capacities. As a note, while compiling this review, think about, I mean, there's no way that we never even attempted to say that we found everything, because how can you find examples like this that are undocumented and undocumentable? There's just, these exist out there, and we only heard of this through word of mouth. But it's a really cool example of something that's already out there, that trust is already established with, just taking off in a completely unique way. And another angle with trust is what happens with the data. So we believe data from the fisheries belongs to the fishers, and the use of the data must be transparent. So another challenge is kind of recognizing the trade-off between data privacy compliance and the development needs of data, and being transparent off the bat of what the data is going to be used for is a valuable tool in developing trust. The review also highlighted that there's very little evidence for ICT use for gender transformative action in small-scale fisheries. One case study we had was Pebbles, where women were making toy animals for export market in Bangladesh as an alternative livelihood in the fishing off-season as a way to stabilize income. And what was really cool about this case is it was partnered with Bcash, which was an already established mobile banking technology where money can be safely and securely transferred to a mobile application without the need of a bank account. So essentially, these women were able to build their own agency and digital capacities to handle finances in a quite entrepreneurial way. Another cool note about this case study is it was quite honest in that it worked. It worked when it was in communities closer to metropolitan areas, but once you started to get to the more remote islands, due to network penetration and internet connectivity, it kind of broke down. It didn't work as well. So overall, of course, there's enormous potential for ICTs and small-scale fisheries, but as it stands, there's limited successes that appear to be homegrown or heavily developed with local counterparts and users. And we have a few broad recommendations, but I'd like to reiterate that the audience of this report that we're developing is really governments that are looking to engage with ICTs. So there's a bit of a policy focus on some of these recommendations. One of them is co-designing the technology with local communities it's intended to serve. So again, we often found that the ICTs were developed far away from the communities or fisheries or social ecological system that they're intending to serve. And there's a bit of a disadvantage in this, in the sense that when it's developed externally without local contextualization, you're coming in with the objectives and the methods already established without fully understanding the context or what the fishermen would like to, what problem the fishermen are having that they would like to have solved. Another recommendation would be creating a conducive regulatory environment and identifying a mutually beneficial entry point. And this ties back into trust. For example, if you're working in a context where there's not a lot of trust between fishermen and authorities, you can, by asking what they want, and let's say, for example, safety at sea is an issue. If you come at it from a safety at sea angle and establish those components first and build trust, and then maybe start working in some of the catch monitoring components that might be more interesting to you. It's a way to build trust, and then there's a name that everyone already knows and understands and is familiar with, and then it can be slowly developed this way. Establishing infrastructure for inclusive participation, training, and capacity building. This is really aimed at policymakers that can ensure equitable access to technological developments through capacity building sessions or activities rather that are outside of formal education systems, such as ICT hangout sessions, etc. And also establishing baselines and planning for impact evaluations. And the last point, and it might be the most important in the sense that many of the examples we found, there is very little data or scientific evidence at evaluating the performance or the efficacy of these initiatives at achieving the fisheries conservation or development outcomes that they're intending to achieve. So often success is not being measured empirically or honestly, and failures are not, they're being swept under the rug. And in order to learn and grow in this space, you really have to share not just the successes, but also the failures. Thank you. Quickly, the report itself should be out by the end of the year. We'll see.
Did anyone have any quick questions for Matt?
This is awesome. I just want to say I'm excited about seeing the report. So let's keep in touch. This will play along with what we're developing. Pretty I don't want to say good, because some of these themes are negative, but at least we're seeing common themes along each of these technologies and observations.
Great. Wow.
And in regard to data protection, do you have any recommendations or guidelines that for best practice? So I think that's something that
Off the top of my head, this is where websites that collate information and can be an access point to learn these best practices would be really beneficial. So, for example, SALT with building database or a library, a digital library of resources, I think that's needed. But off the top of my head, no.
Yeah, very, very good presentation. I actually enjoyed it. A lot of these things that you've spoken about, I've actually seen it play itself out. And I'm speaking from one of the projects that we actually this year had going in the Northern Cape. So what happened was that when you spoke about like the collaboration about, for example, safety at sea. So that's actually what we've done in the Northern Cape, whereby we as Abalobi, we don't 100% focus on safety at sea, but we had a partner organization of which their representative might still be here this week. But any case, and what we've done is that we partnered with them, we went into those communities, and they already have a presence there, they already know the people, they already understand them. So when we said, look, we got this Abalobi app that we can actually start to record data and we started to tell them the story, they were very much on it. And I mean, it acted almost like a cross-platform whereby they even started to put their safety information into our app. And I think that worked. And besides or beyond just the technological aspect, I think the human relations definitely is key, key with the partners. So
what really struck me going to the abalone container was when you could see a profile and you have all of this information of someone, and there's no way that that information is willingly given without trust already being established and built.
Ladies first.
Yeah, I'm interested in every year about the women in terms of what they're doing in the economic growth, and is there some way that we can find more information about that project as to are they the successes today, are they still going?
Yeah, absolutely. With this particular case, do you mean, or?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I can give you resources, information, exchange email. I can send that to you for sure.
That case study was actually a WorldFish project in Bangladesh, so we can connect you with a British outreach.
And there's an adjacent project as well, right? The MENA initiative.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It must have been very hard to decide, which one we're bringing into our table and which ones not, because there are hundreds of examples in North America, in Europe, probably other parts of the world, where people use websites to advertise, they use Facebook pages to run sort of their catch of the day. And I'm wondering, did you look at a few of those as well? Or?
We had of course, a list of exclusion criteria in the review. And one of them is, unless there's a specific output for small-scale fishers, then we didn't include it. If it was aimed at researchers or government or a tool, it wasn't necessarily included in those numbers.
You're right, though. There are a huge amount of kind of recreational fishing things.
Of course.
Of course, those are kind of small scale, but unless they were actually targeting outputs around, excluding all those. But actually, as a supplementary info to the release of the report, we'd like to publish online the list of the ICTs that are included, but also use that as a resource for people to refer to as kind of cases in themselves and to add to as well.
Yeah.
So when that comes up, please do add to it.
Yeah.
If you know of other examples that should.
The intent of the report isn't to say we've comprehensively explored all of the, because it's outdated the second it's out. So it's just, it's a reference framework.
Sorry, just one more question. Do you have a method for getting it to governments, getting them to access the report and implement the recommendation?
I would rely on the WorldFish infrastructure. You know, there's a project, it's specifically with APFIC governments, the Asia Pacific Fishery Commission. So we've already built that rapport, and it's already, well, it's known that this is coming, and they've asked for it, and so it's that kind of that way.
Thank you, Matt.
No worries.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to go into a couple of series of a series of talks now that are actually going to unpack quite a few of the challenges and opportunities that Matt highlighted before. So I'm going to call Jenny to come and give our first talk, but I wanted to just reflect a little bit on the icebreaker. I don't know about you, but in our group, we had tears, we had a group hug, we spoke about illegal fishing, we spoke about traceability, we had like a mini conference on our own. So I really enjoyed that. Well done. Okay, over to you, Jenny.
Or decided not to share their thoughts in the open meeting. And that resulted in decisions being made without them, or their voices not being included when we move forward with any activities. So one reason that women may be excluded from decisions in fisheries management is that fishing is often seen as the domain of men. Before I really get into this, I'd like to take a moment to discuss the difference between sex and gender, because this is something that's important for us to understand, although I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar. Sex refers to biological and physiological characteristics that define female and male animals, such as chromosomes or hormones. So it's also important to know that within this, there's different diversities that we can see amongst communities and individuals. So gender, on the other hand, is culturally and socially ascribed attributes, roles, activities, and responsibilities that are associated with being female or male. So one of the big differences between sex and gender is that gender can vary over time and from one community or one culture to another. Gender is a story that we tell ourselves about what it means to be a man or a woman. And then maybe gender differences in how women and men fish or work in the fisheries sector in different communities. And it's important not to overlook women's activities just because they're not what many people imagine fishing to be. Research worldwide is now recognizing the wide variety of fishing activities undertaken by women and the importance of those activities to livelihoods and food security, just to name 2 examples. Another consideration is that gender norms may stop women from participating in fisheries management. So it's not just about the fishing activities itself, but also the management or governance processes. For example, it might not be considered appropriate for women to speak in meetings in a particular context. So work undertaken by WorldFish in Timor-Leste shows that women's fishing can be an important part of household food supply. And since fisheries management decisions can impact everyone, I think it's fair to say that women and men should be part of the decision-making processes to make sure that they're fair and sustainable. So as fisheries scientists, managers, or however we're connected to the fisheries sector, what can we be doing to integrate gender into our work and ensure that we recognize all fishers and fish workers in our monitoring efforts or our management efforts? Firstly, we should talk to women and men, ask about all fishing methods so that we don't overlook activities such as gleaning, which are traditionally dominated by women in many places. We should also make sure that we train our staff about gender, about these issues, and ensure that we have male and female staff in our teams. We should also make sure that we select our participants or respondents, if we're doing research, in ways that don't limit us to one gender or one perspective. So that might mean surveying in different landing sites where women and men are landing their catches to make sure that we don't overlook female fishers. So let's return to our story from Ilik Namu. Instead of seeing the lack of catch data and women's involvement as 2 distinct problems, we decided to see if we could use fisheries monitoring as a way to encourage women's participation in management, improving the fisheries management at the same time as empowering women. So to address these issues, during the development of the fisheries management program, 8 women from Ilik Namu put themselves forward to create the fisheries monitoring group. The training that they went through focused on the practicalities of the data collection itself, but also confidence building and communication skills, and other softer skills that we need in order for women to be able to participate in the management side of things. After all, the aim of the group is not just to collect valuable data, but also to enable the participants to take a more active role in influencing community decisions around marine management issues. So by using role plays and peer teaching exercises wherever possible, the group were able to get ready to start data collection a lot more quickly than I expected. The program uses the smartphone app ODK, which allows the group to collect data quickly, easily, and cheaply. They conduct interviews with fishers, and they use a co-designed questionnaire on their phones to collect the answers, which are based on the data that the community were most interested in finding out about, and what they thought would be the most useful for making management decisions. So the process involved approaching fishers, like you can see here, asking questions, weighing and photographing the catches. The questionnaire was developed in a participatory way, which involved speaking to the fishers about what data they thought was important and what they wanted to find out about through the monitoring program. And then we also discussed it with the members of the monitoring group to hear what they had to say about which questions would be useful and practical to ask. So that meant that in the co-design process for this questionnaire, we were able to speak to women and men and hear their side of what the questions should be. So once we were all happy with the questionnaire, we decided to start data collection, and we continued to develop the interview questions after that, because I'm sure you'll have had the same
experiences that once you start using a questionnaire, things become apparent that need to be tweaked. So we did that to improve the quality and clarity of the interview data. Since the initial training, we've been having monthly support meetings, catch-up meetings with the groups to address problems, develop our skills as a team, and just to share information and updates about how the program's going. We also adapted our questionnaire to make our data more compatible with the catch data collected by our friends at WorldFish. So following the success of this first group, we were invited to set up a similar program in Bihar on the mainland. Alongside the process of setting up their LMMA, which was successfully designated in December, the community established another fisheries monitoring group. This one consisted of 6 women, and as part of the training for the new team, we were able to host an exchange where the 2 groups met up in Bihar. And they did lots of activities aimed at improving their confidence and communication skills, ensuring the data collection was solid, and they discussed the challenges of the work and potential ways of resolving those problems. So we found that having groups working with each other was a really effective way to discuss these challenges. We also looked at how the groups would like to develop in the future. For example, some of the literature suggests that mixed gender groups might be more beneficial for management outcomes. So I decided to check with the participants about what they actually wanted to do. The local context is really important in this type of issue, and I wanted to be sure that I wasn't pushing my assumptions onto the group. So when I asked them if they wanted to stay a single-sex group, at first nobody would voice an opinion. There was a lot of mumbling. But when we had a vote with everyone's eyes closed, the unanimous vote was to remain a women's-only group because they felt it was a safer space and they felt confident to learn new skills and develop as a women-only group. But we've used this iterative approach throughout to make sure that we're not putting our assumptions from other contexts onto this program, but rather that the participants are constantly the driving force in how we implement this monitoring program. So in the short time that these groups have been running, they've accomplished a great deal. Other communities heard about the project and were keen to get involved. So there are now groups in 3 communities. Not only do they contribute valuable data, but the groups also participate in making decisions about fisheries management. We recently had an exchange where all 3 teams were able to get together and spend a few days learning and getting to know each other. And our data set is growing. Now that the pilot phase is over, I think the most important thing about what we've done so far is that it shows that the project is working. Women can collect valuable data for their communities, and they don't need a university degree to do it. We're collecting useful data that we wouldn't have otherwise, the communities wouldn't have otherwise, and the existence of these groups has already given opportunities to have a seat at the table in discussions that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to participate in. And altogether, the groups so far since our pilot phase have surveyed and entered data about over 2,000 kilos of fish. You might notice that the number of data entries and the number of interviews isn't the same. This is because if the team can't survey fishers according to the schedule, then they can fill in a form and let us know whether it was because the fishers didn't fish at all or because the data collectors weren't able to survey that day based on their availability and other responsibilities. And this flexibility has been essential in enabling women to participate because they have so many other things going on in their lives. If they can't survey because they need to look after their kids, then they can just let us know. And I should also mention that the team members are volunteers. So being able to set their own schedule is a really important part of ensuring long-term engagement and avoiding overburdening already very busy people. And here you can see one of the groups participating in the pre-consultation for the National Fisheries Strategy with MAF and WorldFish, which was a really exciting opportunity for them to use their voice in the conversation around fisheries management. But it was not easy to get to this stage. During the program, we experienced some major challenges. Some of those were expected, like learning how to use the phones, language barriers. But one of the challenges that has been more complicated has been dealing with local leaders, because often the local leaders are very enthusiastic about this program. They love the idea and they're really supportive of the women. But there's always some teething problems in terms of figuring out how to run this program when a new community wants to get involved. Even though they're really proactive and enthusiastic, it's hard for them to deliver the objectives that they would like and how they can support the group members. But now that we've identified these flaws in communication that we had at the start, we've been able to overcome some of those issues with regular data sharing updates, community meetings, outreach activities, and highly visible team shirts with a logo that the groups design themselves, which means that they can feel professional and confident when they approach the fishers at the beach. So I just want to share one last example there, which is at the Women Fishers Forum in Dili, where you can see some of our representatives were invited to participate and share their thoughts on the stage in the capital, which was a really special moment. And when you think about where we started, it's quite a huge jump. The data that the teams collect is valuable, but this program is about so much more than that. Women's empowerment is not just a side effect of our search for better fisheries management, but rather it's a goal in itself. And seeing how this small data project grew to empower women in this way has really inspired me, and I'm now doing a PhD in that area. And we continue to grow this project and develop it and improve it wherever we can. And there's a lot more challenges I would have liked to talk about, but because of the limited time, I can't go into it. So if you have any questions, I'd love to talk to you about it more later on in the day. So find me in a coffee break. But I think through the discussions that we have this week, I hope that we can explore how we can use this opportunity of fisheries monitoring with ICTs to ensure a more sustainable and a more equitable future for small-scale fisheries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jenny. We've got time for 4 or 5 questions. Daniel?
Thank you, Jenny. Daniel from Abalobi. I think communication is often so tricky in a situation like that. And yeah, flows and different platforms and trying our best to make sure that we're in communication with our out in the field. How did you get it right? It sounds like you've got a winning recipe.
Do you mean of communication with field staff or with the participants in the group? Thank you for the question. So the question was about how we make sure that we have good communication with our participants. One of the key things that we use is WhatsApp groups. I think a really big part of why this program has been able to last and grow is the sense of camaraderie and bonding that I think groups of women are really good at, and WhatsApp has been a really important part of that. So we have a WhatsApp group that every member of the program is part of, and we have groups for each community group as well. And that's how we in Dili can maintain communication with them throughout the month. And also they communicate with each other. So they send photos when they're doing surveys. If they see something cool on the beach, they let other people know. So the communication doesn't just come from us, it's also going between the groups themselves on a peer-to-peer level. And we also make sure that we do monthly support meetings. So myself and my colleague, Dedi, who is part of our team in Dili as well, we go each month to meet with the groups and just check in if there's any problems. Teething issues, is ODK working, is the phone signal down that month, whatever issue it might be. And we get WhatsApp messages throughout the month saying, I've got this problem, I've got that problem. So we know what to expect when we get there. We can bring new phones if a phone's got broken, all that kind of thing. So I think the technology has been a really important part of maintaining that communication through WhatsApp, but you can't underestimate the importance of that face-to-face monthly meeting, especially for some of the people who are a bit less confident. They might feel too shy to write about their problems in a WhatsApp group, but they're quite happy to take you to one side and let you know about their worries face-to-face. So I think trying to balance those two things has been a really big part of this this communication process.
And the communication on WhatsApp, it's in local language.
Yeah.
Okay. It was Alex and then Krista.
Thanks, Jenny. That was really good. A lovely insight. I'm curious about the kind of cyclical relationship between aspirations and empowerment. And I'm curious how the aspirations of these women change with their increasing empowerment and capacity development. So compared with when you started, what were their aspirations for decision making? Did they want to actually be involved in making decisions in the fishery, or did they just want, capacity development in a particular aspect? And then how did those change as you went through the process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was about the link between aspirations and empowerment in this case study. I think this is really important because on the first day of the training, I thought it was a meeting to let everyone know about what the program would be and ask them if they wanted to sign up. But it turned out that they had already decided they were signing up and it was nothing to do with me. So at this meeting, I asked them, why are you here? What are you interested in? What's motivated you to come along? Because as I mentioned, this is a volunteer program. So they were not motivated by money. Although we provide phone credit to send the data and to cover the cost of participating, we also provide the smartphones. There's no financial incentive other than that to join in. So I asked them what was the reason. And almost everyone in the group just said, I want to learn something new. That was it. They didn't specifically care about fisheries management in particular. They were just keen to do something new and to do something where they felt they could contribute to their community. Amazing. The first group that we had was a lot of young women. So they didn't have children. They didn't have schooling to go to because they're finished. And a lot of them were just looking for something interesting to do. And because it's this group mentality and they go and survey in pairs, it's really a great chance to hang out with your friends, take some selfies on the beach, all that fun stuff at the same time. So I think those were the initial reasons that they joined, but that didn't last long. It didn't take long before they became some of the most vocal advocates for marine conservation and fisheries management in their communities. And I think they're really giving all their uncles, brothers and fathers a hard time about the fishing activities. So the more we went on, the more they started to get really passionate about the fisheries management, and then that's what's kept them involved as they've gone along. So at the start, they would, no way would they stand up in a meeting and say their opinions. I had to do it. We started off with standing up together and presenting together. And now we've gotten to the point where they will stand up and explain the project, and I only stand up to talk about the graphs. And hopefully in the next year, maybe they'll be completely presenting it themselves. So we'll see, but that's been a big change. The fact that Anna here was in Dili on a stage with a microphone, she would never have done that before. And that's something that I feel really proud of, that they've gone outside their comfort zone. And so I think as they've got more involved in the group, they've started to see that they can do these things. And those things that started off as lofty aspirations that they felt were not for them, that those are for city people, or those are for men or older people, that they're starting to realize that they can participate in those things as well. And one example that I think is really important is just the idea that they have opinions now. When we first started, I would ask them about their opinions and I would get not really clear answers. They were very diplomatic and they didn't have, even if they had an opinion, they wouldn't share it. And I remember asking this group about what did they think about having closures, fisheries closures in the community. And that was maybe the first week of the program and no one gave an answer. There was a lot of mumbling and avoiding eye contact. But then after about a year, we were talking about it again. And I said, what do you think about it now? What do you think about having this fisheries management? And straight away, Anna, who's up here on the screen, said, well, you know, we young people, we really want fisheries management, but it's the older generation that they're looking at today and the situation today, but we young people, we're looking towards the future. And the fact that she felt confident to A, have the opinion, and B, share the opinion to a group, you know, and really put her foot down. And that was so amazing to me, because it wasn't so long ago that even having that opinion would have felt like far beyond the level that this group were at, but now they're up on the stage doing that. So I also want to say thank you to WorldFish and Math, who you know, have been really supportive and invited these groups and representatives from this program to other activities, because it's been really special for them as well, that they're not just in their own team, but that they can visit more places and work with other organizations as well.
Christoph.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. That was really great. And also very detailed answers. I think you answered a couple of things that I was interested in anyway. But I was wondering about the sustainability beyond, because although you say you don't have incentives, the cell phones themselves are costly and an incentive. If you are done with the project to be leaving, acquiring that piece of equipment to maintain the monitoring, that's something in a small village, quite an expensive commodity. How do you foresee that happening in this project? Should you have to leave or something?
So the question was about the sustainability of this program. So you're right that there are incentives at play. I guess I just mean that there's no additional salary component. But I think for us, we're starting to put more emphasis of the activities with the groups themselves. So in terms of the sustainability from a social point of view, we now have leaders within each group who are kind of the mentor, the focal point, the leader, who are kind of making sure that everyone else is keeping on track, and those people act as a kind of a go-between for the group and Blue Ventures, or the group and local government, or whoever it may be. So I think I'm starting to see how these groups can take on more and more themselves and self-organize and keep things how they want to do it. You know, like I said, they organize their schedule themselves already, and they're gonna take on more and more of those organizational parts. I think the tech itself is a really good question of how that's gonna work in the future. Although some people have smartphones, not everyone does. And an additional issue is the cost of the credit for the phones. So even if it is achievable for people to have smartphones, the phone credit and having access to the internet is also a big question in terms of sustainability. So at the moment, these phones belong to the program, not to the individuals in the group. So they sign a contract that says that they'll look after it. And when someone leaves the group, they return the phone. And usually the system is, because obviously this is a women's group, so we have a lot of people going on maternity leave and so on. So when people do that, they usually find some friend or cousin or somebody to take their place, and they hand the phone on to that person. So we already have a culture where the phone is not something that they're trying to hold on to, but that they see the phone as part of the program, and so it can be passed on. Of course, phones break, and we do have to replace them, so that there is a funding issue there. So in terms of what that could look like in the future, I'm not sure. We're still really early on in the stages with this, so in terms of an exit strategy, we don't have anything specific in mind or a timeline for that, but at the moment we're just focusing more on the social elements of the sustainability, and hopefully we can find some solutions for the technical side later on. And if anyone has any suggestions about that, please come and tell me in the coffee break.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That was very interesting and very inspiring. I'll definitely invite everybody to come chat to Jenny during the coffee breaks or the lunches. We need to move on. I'm glad to ask Wildan to come. He's our next presenter, and he's going to be talking about feedback tools, methodologies with fishers, fishing communities. But while he's coming to the stage, can we all just stand up for a second? I don't know if you've heard the news already, But Wildan here and his wife, our new parents, they had their baby last night. And so we've got a new dad here. Woo! Congratulations, Dad. Okay, we are dead keen on a picture, man. Okay, over to you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Wildan. Thank you, Sergi, for the tell the information, and then I'm happy. I know my wife so far away, and then so I try to give a good presentation for you. Actually, in my head, already in my home.
Yeah.
But I will try to give the best. Okay. I will done. I work with MDPI in local NGO in Indonesia. I'm not alone here. I also have a partner there, Putra Satria Timur. There, he is a data collection officer, and then he have a lot of experience in the field with the data collection. And then I not have time to explain our organization. I have some information here. Maybe Timur and Fiona can help to share with you all. And also the beside here also have barcode about traceability we implementing in small scale fisheries. But please don't try to scan now. Please focus in my presentation. Okay. I'm very happy have opportunity, then have a sharing and then learning our experience in this conference. Maybe I have 12 minutes to finishing this presentation. At the end of my presentation, maybe will useful for you are maybe in your country and your work and project how we work in Indonesia in small scale fisher data to co-management and collaboration and make the participation from the small scale fishers for the fisheries management. Okay, I will have 3 points to explain about you. Indonesian is large expertise water, and then Indonesian fishing fleet structure. I think it's a good chance to me to share about what happened in Indonesia in small scale fishers. And then in this, the last point, the main point is data collection process to co-management. That's our small scale fishers. They catch tuna, big tuna, I think it's yellowfin tuna. Yeah, it's very happy. Okay, here we go. It is the Indonesia. We have the large expertise water. The government have 11 fisheries management area. How to manage that area? So maybe you can see there the total maybe 6.3 million kilometers square. Is very wide. And then where we are working, we working at that area, maybe in 5 fisheries management area. MDPI, not all area, but it's one site or one village or district in some province. And then about small scale, this is our fisher in Indonesia. From the government data, more than 90% it's small scale fishers. It is including vessel without engine, and then outboard motors, and then engine less than 10 gross tons. So we focus for this guy. It is the boat from Ambon. In Molucas. It is a handline boat, and then they using this one to fishing tuna. Yeah, it is the data collection process. We work first time with the small scale fishers from the data collection. This is just the process. The fisher get that fish and then start in the morning, maybe 4 p.m., then come back at 4 p.m. or yeah, maybe 15 hours. At the day also some area have a more big vessel, maybe need to 1 or 2 weeks to go fishing. And then we have a numerator in the landing. We training them, training by the government also, expert from the scientific person, also the governments, and then maybe 1 or 2 people stay in the one area to collect data, like small scale for headline and pull line, and then vessel information about what gear type, fishing ground, vessel and engine capacity, and then fuel use, also ice use, total catch, fishing technique, and then a lot of information in the general to know the operationals of the vessels. Also, we collect data about bait use, what kind of categorize or species they using bait to catch fish, catch tuna, and then bycatch, of course, is important thing. And then we doing the subsampling method for length of small tuna, like with fork length. We also have doing some biology data here, and then length and weight for target tuna. We have individual for the large tuna, and then also interaction with endangered and threatened and protected species, ETP species, how the headline tuna have interaction with that. So this data required by RFMO also, and then national governments, local government. Also the important things, this data useful for develop the harvest strategy in that place. So the data will be, I think from last year, we already moved to apps, iFish app, using the by phone, using the phone, and then input the direct data. But previously we using the manual. All data we put in the iFish database. iFish database. Also we have a dashboard to directly analyze like the length, frequency, catch per unit effort, production per fishing ground, and then we can see the directly there. So here we can say the database is the main point how to make in fisheries management, and then have the co-management, and then in co-management we discuss also about this data and then some issues in related to fisheries. So this is the process in our data collection in the co-management. Okay, it is for example in the field, not only have enumeration to take the data information, we also put some technology to know the understanding what happened at sea. We put the spot race and then PDS like in Timor-Leste, right? And then to know where the potential fish. Yeah, actually the device also for the small scale fish is very expensive. We need to buy subscription per year, and then to make sure the database, the data spot coordinate must to copy to our server. If not, we'll be lost. Yeah, it is to understanding where the position. Because in the enumerator, in our enumeration, our field team try to identify locations based on the grid of the area, maybe 60 miles, 60 nautical miles. So it is to help us to identify all the detail. Then also it is the network, the measuring the fish using the apps, and then all data point already there in the iFish app, and then all the data will put in the iFish database. Also, we put a camera on the boat because our regulation in Indonesia, they no required to observer. So how we know before, more than 90% is small scales. I think it's a lot of vessels. You must to know how they work actually. We put the camera. Usually this camera for not for at sea, at the land, like Tamm's camera, the building to record, but we tried that. Some of are already broken. Yeah, then we can see the activity, especially it's for ETP species. We want to know what the interaction with the ETP species. And then also we this year try to deploy the observer on board from the governments. I think is the idea how the government understanding also what happened in the small scale vessels, small scale fisheries. So they join the trip and then record and then take a photo and then yeah. This is the co-management. Here we say I can say it's a fisheries co-management committee meeting. So the participants come from national government, local governments, and then NGO, and then university, academy, and then also the important thing is the suppliers, company, and small-scale fishers. This representative. We cannot invite all people, but some of them will representative for the discussion. So we have a conduct meeting 2 times per year, and then during that meeting, they will be invited by government actually, because we this fisheries management established by governments by governor degree or the local government degree, like we say is DKP, Marine and Fisheries Agency. So we come together to develop the term of reference and then explain about what happened, what next discuss we will to do. It's for example in North Maluku, we conduct in 25 April, have 62 participants, and then also female and 11 there. Is the result. At the end, not only data we discuss, also about issue in related in fisheries. So we have a result and recommendation, also action plans to work for next 6 months. For example, there the continue data collection and vessel registrations we conduct, and then we separate that rule who will support that money or in kind, and then small scale filling the logbook fishers, how they filling that, maybe by training, socialization, and then reporting data and activity in the local government is the asking how our activity in the fisheries report, sign the guideline. Also, we have a guidelines for the fisheries management, maybe still in the translate in English. You can check in our website. And then registration fisher and suppliers to Kusuka. Kusuka is the ID card for the fisher. Identify local NGO to more involved in this renewing decree, and then yeah, a lot of idea we can work together. And then is the degree. And then in the national, we try 5 minutes more. Oh, stop. I see the 5. In the national, we also have a regional fisheries co-management. We invite 6 fisheries co-management together and then lesson learn and then discuss. This is only one time meeting per year. So last year on January we decided before the name is Data Management Committee. Now change to fisheries co-management, because not only data we discuss, but a lot of issue in the fisheries small scale. And then also in the field we have SID, SID, not SID, but SID, sharing information and data. Because in Indonesia have a ban SID, Superman is dead, so more familiar. So we put SID to easy to understand what happened. You give the graphic annual catch every vessels, and then also how many sampling data we conduct every vessels, and then we have a sharing also the total income per vessels, and then who is the champion this year, and then we inform the supplier. Maybe the supplier have idea, give reward, or I don't know. Yeah, it is the how we communicate our data. Yeah, I think Only that. Maybe at the end, I want to say here, I'm very happy to see Mr. David can explain in a story their job and then their implementation with Abalobi. I think it's the great time, great for fisher to come to conference and stay. I think for the future we must send every fisher to join, because this is the important thing. Because same the fisher difficult to say you using mic. No, very scared. So I think it's a good opportunity also. I learned so much with Abalobi. Thank you so much.
Okay, we've got time for 2 questions. So Philip, I see your hand is up. Girl. Woo. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Okay, then let's move on. Thanks so much, Will. If I can ask Fiona. Yeah, there we go. So our next presenter is Fiona, and she's going to be talking about ICTs and literacy.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's what it says. Okay. Just to remember, so after this, we're going to have a tea break because we've got a sort of slight change in the agenda, and then we'll dive into marketplace traceability again.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fiona Moejes. I am the Marine Programs Manager for a small NGO in the Comoros called Dahari. And today I just want to give you a little bit of insight on how we've overcome barriers in data and technology literacy using our program as an example. But to just give you a bit of context, I thought I'd introduce a little bit into what Dahari does. Dahari was established only in 2013, so we're a very young organization. And the original work was mostly done with terrestrial projects. So a lot of agriculture and agroforestry work, ecology work, and natural resource management, including reforestation around the watershed. And its newest baby is the Marine Resources Management Program. So this was only started in 2015 with the help of Blue Ventures. So we've been working very closely with them throughout the development of the program. So where are the Comoros? Let's start with that. So geographically, we're located between Mozambique and Madagascar, and all our work is taking place on one island, Nzwani Island. So in French, it's Anjouan, but in the local language, it's Nzwani Island. And this is the most populous of all the Comorian islands. So this is why we feel like we could have a bigger impact on this island. So Mutsamut is where our offices are, and the red dot is where most of our marine program is taking place. So here's a little picture, and I'll talk a little bit more about it after. So the main activities of the Marine Resources Management team is, initially we did a lot of socioeconomic analysis to get an idea of what the communities, or how they're kind of set up, and how they relied on their marine resources. So we had an idea of how we could work with them and shape the activities around that. We also did reef monitoring to get an idea of what the reefs are actually looking like, and to get a snapshot of how the ecosystem, how healthy it was. And obviously this is super important for small scale fisheries, as they're super reliant on these reef systems. We work very closely with 2 organizations. The first is Maisha Bora, which is a Fisherwomen's Association. And the second is Malezi Mema, which is a Fishermen's Association. We carry out different types of activities, but some of them are doing training in data analysis, which I'll talk about more, as well as doing the biology of reef species and teaching them about life cycles and stuff like that, as well as governance skills as well, in terms of leadership, communication, how to handle their finances within the organization, within the association. And we also do alternative livelihood and value addition activities. So these include drying activities for the fisherwomen to increase the value of their products, as well as doing alternative livelihood stuff like improving how they do their agricultural practices. So it's all coupling everything together in terms of what the other projects that Dahari has, so that we can improve, basically diversifying their livelihood. And of course, the participatory catch monitoring. So this is what was started in the early stages of the project as well. So the aim of the participatory catch monitoring really was to get an idea of what the fishing situation was on Dwani Island, and also to begin to provide the communities with the tools to record their data and have something to look back on to make informed decisions in the future. But there's two types of catch monitoring that we do. The first is the reef cleaning. This is mostly done by the fisher women, who go out onto the reef flat and fish for octopus using a metal rebar, and as well as for reef species using actually a poison plant called uruva, which is a tapioca plant. But our activities, which I won't go into here, but is to kind of provide them with alternatives that are a lot more sustainable than these destructive techniques. Majority of the catch is used for personal consumption, and only a small part of it is actually used for sale. The second type is the boat fishing, which is done almost exclusively by the fishermen. And they use two different types of boats. The first is the pirogue, which just goes kind of close to the reef, and the second is the vedettes, which go out into the deep ocean to catch pelagic species such as tuna and skipjack. And that's mostly all for sale. So when we began the participatory catch monitoring, we had to train community technicians to collect the data, which I'll explain a little bit more. And we have 6 different landing sites. So we have technicians waiting on these 6 sites to record the catch of the reef cleaning, and these 2 sites for recording the boat catches. So at the beginning, we had manual notebooks that everything was logged in. So this was done by the literate community members. So these were usually younger people who were not fishers, but they worked in teams so that they were working with the fishers to actually do the measurements and stuff, and then the recording was done by the younger community members. In 2017, we introduced ODK, more for recording what the fishers are doing instead of what the fish were doing. But in order to record work days, the sites that they're working, the total number of fishers per site. And we continued using the notebooks for recording the actual weights of the fish and stuff. And then in 2018, we went digital. We moved everything onto tablets and started using ODK to monitor the catch data as well. And the Excel forms were used to digitalize all the notebooks that we had. So this took a long time, but at the beginning of this year, we finally have everything on Excel sheets. So the implementation of the system, both the original notebook system and the tablets, was done really first with the community members that were usually younger and more tech savvy and could read and write. But what we did was, like I mentioned before, we coupled them with the fisher women and the fishermen, so that they didn't feel like they were being left out at all in the data collection process. So they were doing the weighing, the measuring, and then their partner would be inputting the data using the tablets. But the aim that we as for our program is to really make sure that all the fishers, irrespective of their literacy levels, were able to utilize the data. So this is something that we think is very important, and that they're able to explain this and disseminate this to the rest of the community, so that as a whole they could make informed decisions on how they're managing their resources. So yeah, because at the end of the day, we as an organization want to be able to have a community that can stand on its own and do the whole process. Obviously this will take some time, but we have to always constantly remind ourselves that we're not there forever. And yeah, so at the moment, now after we've done all the participatory catch monitoring, it's important that we provide them with the skills to understand the data that they've collected. And this is done, we started properly this year. We worked with Masyarakat, the Fisher Women's Association, to train them on how the data that they're seeing that we present back to them, how this was kind of put together. So we discussed with them what kind of visualization preferences they had. We showed them different types of pie charts and line graphs and bar graphs, and asked for their feedback in terms of which they preferred. And they seemed to all prefer bar charts, which was interesting because we also had pictographs, and we thought maybe those would be easier to understand. They really enjoyed just simple bar graphs. And we worked with them to help to teach them how these graphs are put together, and so that they can draw them themselves. And then after that, describe the trends that they're seeing. So yeah, the methods that we're using is presentations. We do PowerPoint presentations, but not as, it's kind of yeah, not that often, because where we are, there is obviously no electricity or anything, and I feel they're not as engaged when we're doing the PowerPoint presentation. So we do a lot of just speaking and discussing with them, asking questions, as well as flip charts. So sometimes we come with pre-drawn graphs on flip charts, and we describe trends or ask them to describe trends, and sometimes we draw the graphs together in groups. We usually split them into smaller groups, because what we find is in the bigger groups, you always have a few of the women who are very, very vocal, and they'll answer all the questions, and then some of the quiet ones don't have a chance to say their thoughts. And so we kind of split them, and they're willing to speak to you more when they're in a smaller group and don't feel under pressure to present. And one of the very successful methods is using games. So we've used a lot of interactive games with the fisherwomen. One of the games was based on something that they did in Indonesia with this kind of fishing game. So what we did is we split the women into 3 groups, which depicted 3 fishing villages. And then we drew a big circle on the ground, which depicted the reef. And then we gave them fishing tools, which was basically a cut-up plastic bottle and a stick attached to it, and then sweets. And the sweets were the octopus. And so we just let the women, for 12 rounds, depicting every month of the year, go ahead and fish. And yeah, obviously by month 8, by August, there was no octopus left because they fished everything. And so for round 2, so the second year of fishing, we asked them to, okay, think about a little bit, discuss in your groups, do you have any kind of measures that you want to put in place? And obviously they remembered that they'd done the octopus closure last year. So like, okay, we'll do a closure. So all the groups actually ended up doing a closure for at least 1 month. And what they found was obviously that octopus till the end of the year. So as we do in real life, they collected the data every month. And then they went ahead and drew the graphs. So they literally, in the previous picture, you can see that they're stacking the sweets, and they drew around the sweets. And so they actually could visualize what it meant when we do these bar graphs. So they have, it's tangible. They can see that there's 10 sweets or 10 octopus in this month, and so on. And then after this, we asked them all to present. So each group came up and presented the trends that they saw, and then discussed what they would do for the next year. So if there was a 3rd year, what would they do? So yeah, this was it really worked really well, and I think we're very lucky because the women of Masyarakat are incredibly motivated people. And yeah, so they were super excited to do this, and I feel like they now feel that it's not so alien, the idea of graphs and all of this. So it's a start. So what we would like to do next is to give them the skills to present this data back to their communities. This is still a work in progress, and it's such a multifaceted thing, because most of it is their confidence, but the confidence to stand up and tell the communities what they found, and to be able to lead discussions within their communities. So a lot of the different things that we do in terms of the softer skills that Jenny mentioned, in terms of leadership, communication and stuff, are really key to helping this. And like Jenny said, they are growing. They're growing incredibly fast, and they're gaining such a confidence, and they're so proud to be part of Masyarakat and the activities that we do, that now they feel, they feel empowered. You can sense in the way they stand. We've had events where we've had media come, and they would go up and speak to the radio, the guy from the radio, the guy from the TV, and really proudly say what they're doing, and it's really, really great to see. So yeah. So the overall goal is to just overcome the issue of different levels of literacy within the community through doing outreach trainings, continuing the participatory monitoring, so that the fishermen and the women, as well as the wider community, can understand the catch monitoring results and discuss them, so that they can guide adaptive management of their marine resources. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Nick?
Thanks, that's really good. I'm very intrigued by the gamification stuff. That's something that we've tried a little bit with our training. And quick question around the literacy issue on the data capture side. Did you or have you looked at icon-based apps? So, where it's all sort of, in effect, icons, pictures, and you train users to tap the pictures with information. And if you have, or if you haven't, are there enough sort of are there enough people that it makes more sense to actually just pick people that are literate?
So yeah, the question was about using icons in the data capturing system or the forms that we're using. We've not, as far as I know, we've not tried the icon system yet. As it stands, it works. It works in the sense that we're really forming this sense of community, because it's not only fishermen and women that are doing the data collection. So that we're changing the people that we train. So the technicians that do the data capturing changes every 6 months. So every 6 months we get a new group of people, and we're retraining every 6 months to really widen as many people, so that as many people are involved in the process, so that more and more people understand why we're doing it, rather than kind of isolating and only having a couple of people do it. I'd like to see if the icon system would work. I don't know whether some of the fishermen and women are a little bit older and are scared to use the tablets, if they just would rather not touch them. So that would be something interesting to discuss with them and see whether they would be willing, especially as their confidence continues to grow. I don't see why it couldn't be something we could try. Yeah.
Thanks, Fiona. There were a few other, Greg, yeah.
So regarding the games, we did similar things with games in Seychelles, and what it allowed us to do was really quite often play the games. We got an idea of what the fishermen are games. Quite often they wouldn't speak up and say things. But we designed these games and they would use the game exactly how they fish. And it allowed us to gather that information. Did you have a similar experience where you would gather more information from the games?
The question is whether we gathered more information in terms of their fishing practices in the games, during the games. Yeah. No. At first, it was really, they were just going for it and really trying to catch as many sweets as they could in each round. I think it's after we kind of planted the seed in terms of, do you remember what we did with the closures and how many octopus were we got at the end of and we did the openings and stuff like that. So then they started the discussion, but originally it was really a game for them, and they really were, really playing it to catch as many sweets as they could. So no, at first it wasn't, but we've not tried this with the fishermen actually. So this would be something to see whether they would do it differently than with the fishermen. So yeah.
Hilda.
Yeah, mine is actually more of a comment, and I'm just sitting here excited to hear that what's happening there by you, what you need to do, and others presented, and bringing them together, bringing us all together in one room, interest and other partners, and thinking about, it's really about the confidence building in terms of using the tablet, right? And it's a process, so it's not a fixed. It's not a fixed answer that you can put to it, but really see where is the community at, and bringing ICT4Fisheries and FAO, SDGs and VGTs, and the human development component, including gender equality, etc. So I'm very appreciative.
Thanks, Hilda. Okay, well, thank you so much. That was great. Almost coffee break. I'm really keen for coffee. But Margaret's got 2 points to make.
I've been missing having the floor, so I had to get up. So just 3 quick things. Before you grab your coffee, can you guys all follow Magenta outside? Magenta's been helping us, and we're gonna get a group photo. Okay. The second thing is.
Okay, we're gonna kick off.
Our next presenter is not here. He's also sleeping. He's in Canada, but he recorded a talk, and it's Eric from ThisFish. I think many of you know Eric. He was at the conference a couple of years back here in Cape Town as well, and I know, of course, that the ThisFish platform is being used in Belize, and we're also looking at an integration. So yeah, Eric is deep in the world of traceability marketplaces and has developed some pretty impressive software that's been deployed in, I think, about 15 sites across the world at the moment. So yeah, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Eric, who's going to be talking via video about his work and about his perspectives around traceability in small-scale fishing.
So, as we know, seafood is one of the most globally traded proteins on Earth. I mean, this industry is massive, global, and complex. Yet the information systems running global supply chain are pretty archaic. Most of the data is trapped on paper ledgers, on paper forms, on graph paper, even on scraps of paper. And sort of joke that the seafood industry is drowning in paperwork. Kind of reminds me of the poem "The Rhyme of Ancient Mariner." Data everywhere, but not across the same. So where do we start in this massive global?
Okay, volume is not ideal, but it was nice and loud this morning.
So readings from the
Just pause it for a minute. That's the one we need to use. Yeah. Okay, let's try. Yeah. Okay, let's be quiet.
For Canada, I'd first like to start by thanking Serge's team for inviting me to give a presentation. And apologize for not being able to be there in Cape Town. I had the fortune actually to go to the very first ICT workshop for small-scale fisheries a couple of years ago in Cape Town, and really enjoyed myself. So today, Serge and his team have asked me to talk about the seafood processing sector, and specifically how ICT technology applies to the sector and the sort of data sector. So for my presentation today, what I'm going to do is really talk about why I believe the seafood processing sector is one of the most critical nodes in the seafood supply chain. I'm going to give a little bit of background on the sector, talk about some of the challenges of bringing technology to the sector, and then conclude by just talking about what I think some of the future opportunities are for the sector. So let's just get started. So as you know, seafood is one of the most globally traded proteins on Earth. I mean, this industry is massive, global, and complex. Yet the information systems running global supply chains are pretty archaic. Most of the data is trapped on paper ledgers, on paper forms, on graph paper, even on scraps of paper. And sort of a joke that the seafood industry is drowning in paperwork. It kind of reminds me of the poem "The Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner." Data everywhere, but not a drop to sink. So where do we start in this massive global industry? There are literally millions of fishing vessels and small-scale farms on one side, and millions of restaurants and retailers on the other. But in the middle, there's actually only about 23,000 processing companies involved in global trade. So this is the most critical node in the supply chain because they're ultimately the data bottleneck. And it's my belief that if we can actually digitize this sector, it'll provide incentives to pull data from the harvesting and small-scale farm sector for agriculture, and then be able to push that data down into the supply chain. So what does the seafood processing sector look like? Well, it's actually very small scale, very much like the harvesting sector. The vast majority of seafood processing companies in the world have less than 50 employees. So this graph shows you a distribution between small scale and large scale, and as you can see, about 78% of the companies have less than 50 employees. In terms of where are they located, about 60% of the world's seafood processors are located in Southeast Asia, about 27% in Europe, and then the others in North America, South America, and Africa, and the Middle East. However, if we look at the number of companies with a number of firms with over 100 employees, there's a disproportionate large number in Asia, whereas the seafood processing sector tends to be more small scale, both Europe and North America. And that's largely to do with the cost of labor. Most of the labor-intensive processing sector is located in Southeast Asia and China. However, the numbers with regard to the total number of firms sort of hides the fact that there's a sort of power law or skewed distribution in terms of the amount of production and revenue coming from firms. So this graph here shows you Vietnamese shrimp processors. And what it does is it looks like at the total amount of export value and the number of firms. And what you'll see here is that 20% of the firms actually contribute to 80% of the export value. So there is a sort of power law distribution with a small number of large companies and large factories that contribute disproportionately to the production of seafood. You'll see that in the shrimp processing sector. You'll likely see it also in the tuna sector, largely because of the large-scale canneries. So the industry is also fragmented with many different types of products and species, fresh, frozen, smoked, live. As a result, it's a very fragmented market around the world. It's also globally dispersed with a large number of seafood processors located in very remote or rural regions. There is some clustering that occurs, particularly in the tuna industry, because of the capital-intensive nature of the tuna canneries with all the machinery, tin cans, and the need for supply. You do see some clustering in that industry, along with clustering in the shrimp industry, which typically means the seafood or the shrimp processors are located somewhat close to the shrimp farm production. In terms of the technology challenges in this sector, first I want to just describe the kind of data that is being collected in the factories. So this graph here basically plots the type of data, the quality control data, production data, and what I call machine data, data coming off machines. And it plots it against how automated it is. That is, it's very low automation or human or manual collection versus highly manual machine collection. And the frequency data is collected very infrequently, just sampled, or highly frequent, that is, the data is just being live streamed. So this chart really shows that quality control data, by and large, is sampling data typically collected by people, doing sensory evaluations, temperature recordings, that sort of thing. Production data, we start to see a bit more automation in that sector with some ERP and manufacturing execution system software, connected weigh scales, some label printers, and that sort of thing. But it's also, by and large, still most of the data is recorded on paper. And then finally is machine data. So that might be electrical cookers, where you're streaming temperature and time off the equipment. So some of the challenges with the seafood sector is, one is, on the left-hand side is a survey of companies that use enterprise resource planning software. So that's basically business software in their companies. And what you'll see is that by and large, the companies that use some sort of enterprise software have revenues that are higher than $50 million. But then if we look at the graph on the right, what that actually shows you is that the vast majority of seafood companies make less than $50 million. million. So in fact, there has historically been, I think, a mismatch between the type of software outing that's being sold to business that's really for large-scale enterprises and the small-scale nature of the sector. The other big challenge is around customization. So this graph here shows you the percentage of customization that happens when you install software to an enterprise. So by and large, about 26% of enterprise software, or 26% of the code in enterprise software is highly customized for the specific business. So customization often adds cost to the software. The big challenge for the seafood sector, though, is that in terms of manufacturing, traditional manufacturing is really about aggregation. You take a number of car parts and you assemble them together in a vehicle. But in seafood manufacturing, it's largely disaggregation or disassembly. Take the fish and pull it apart. So traditional enterprise and manufacturing software really doesn't work for seafood, or if it does work, you have to highly customize the software, which then adds more cost, onto its installation operation. So these are some of the reasons why we don't see a lot of manufacturing software in the seafood space. So as a result, most companies are still operating paper in their factories, and as we all know, paperwork can be quite painful. However, things are changing. There are some what I call technology adoption drivers that I think are starting to lead to some fundamental change in the industry. And these are, first and foremost, traceability. That increasingly the market and regulators are demanding traceability, and the industry is starting to feel that pressure. The other one is the cost of technology. So this is what I call the fish and chips index, and what it shows is the FAO price index from 1990 plotted against a price index for semiconductors, which is a proxy for computer chips or technology. And what you'll see is that actually seafood has increased by 60% since 1990 in terms of its real value, and technology has declined by 40%. So these sort of are the mega trends, the meta trends that are helping to drive technology adoption nowadays. We're also seeing innovation in other seafood or in other sectors with IoT, sensor connectivity, AI, machine learning, and blockchain. So as other food sectors and other consumer goods sectors start to adopt these technologies, what you'll start to see is some spillover into the seafood sector. And we've already seen some of our first blockchain projects in the seafood sector as well. So the main technology or the main adoption driver, though, is not just going to be pressure from the market, but there's a certain value proposition coming from all of this technology. So if we look at what are the drivers, the external drivers are really from the regulators, the certifiers, and the market demanding increased traceability. But there's also internal drivers inside companies, and that's really about saving time, cutting costs, and improving process control. It's about the value proposition for the company. And I just want to touch on that for a couple moments. So what is the value proposition? Well, first is compliance. Improving your data collection and your data integrity. You can help reduce data errors, speed up reporting, standardize data, really strengthen the integrity of your data. Then there's obviously your customers. You can increase transparency, reduce supply chain risk, and ultimately build better trust with your customers. And then finally, it's about cost. You can abolish paperwork, eliminate redundant data entry, and really automate your reporting. And then finally, it's about control, about improving process control in your factory. And that's ultimately about better controlling your material costs. You can take more quick corrective action, improve your processes, and analyze your trends over time. So these are some of the kind of fundamental value propositions that I think will ultimately drive adoption of technology in the sector. Now I want to talk a little bit about what I see in terms of the future, and that's really about big data. So this is an image of 1 day of data recording in a Thai tuna canal. So as you can see, there's probably 400 or 500 pages here, and accumulate that over a year period, and you're looking between 80 to 100,000 pages of data. But unfortunately, most of the value of that data is sort of locked away. These types of records are initially put in a filing cabinet, but then eventually are put into cardboard boxes and stacked into a warehouse. So by digitizing all this data, you can really unlock a lot of value from the data. And that data is really about two things. The data can help you understand your past, but with new technologies like AI and machine learning, it can also help you predict the future. So first, in terms of the past, having all of this data will provide you with better business intelligence. You can look at your trends and build dashboards to better understand your business, your productivity, your yields, your quality control over time. But with new machine learning algorithms, all of this data will also help you predict your future. And what machine learning really is about is creating predictive algorithms that use your past behavior to try to predict your future behavior. So in terms of seafood processing, we know that yields are really one of the essential business drivers for a company. That is, what percentage of the raw material, the fish, actually ends up in the final product. So it's typically a percentage. So with machine learning, what you can do is basically collect a whole number of variables about the quality of your raw material, where it came from, the size, the species of it, and then you can correlate it to different process control in your factory to ultimately determine yield. So in the future, we could potentially create predictive algorithms where all you need to do is put information about the raw material that you have or you purchase, and the software itself may make recommendations about the type of product you should create or the type of process control that you should implement in the factory in order to maximize your yields. So these are some of the type of, I think, value you'll start to see as we accumulate large data sets in the seafood processing sector. So that's my presentation for today. If you have any questions or would like to reach out, please drop me a line. Here's my email at eric@this.fish. You can also maybe send me a message on Twitter, or if you want to send me some questions. And my Twitter handle is @this_fish. That's this_fish. So thanks for your time, and I hope you enjoy your conference. And yeah, I'm really sad that I wasn't able to make it down to Cape Town, especially because it's a dark and stormy day in Vancouver today. So thank you very much, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks. Okay, so we can't ask him questions right now. But any perspectives, any kind of comments? It's quite a leap from this morning's session, which was very much about developing, participatory data collection, monitoring methodologies and programs on the ground in small-scale fishing communities. and then kind of taking it all the way to, well, a lot of that fish goes into some pretty complex supply chains. What are some of the trends? What are some of the requirements in some of these supply chains? And what are some of Eric's perspectives? Any? Yep, Krista.
I think what stood out for me on the graphs is the amount of people employed, the revenue used in terms of the first factory, how many people are employed, and compared to how many people are employed, only 10% of the revenue.
Yeah.
10% of the revenue.
Yeah.
So actually, we were creating a lot of value going back to communities in that way. You know, so I mean, that for me is a
Yes. A bit louder, please. Just a little bit louder, please. Yeah. No, I don't think anybody here has experimented with MDPI. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we also working with Eric in ThisFish, use a PBO system.
Yeah.
You have.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we also working with Eric, we have a IFIT project about flexibility. Set up a PBO system in the processing plant. And then after that, we have lesson learned, and now we become in testers because different processing have different systems. Maybe like has a loin and then say loin product is not learn, and then we already have a database, and then now we already connect in the blockchain. We work also close with Anova Food, how their data can connect in the blockchain. Actually, here, this barcode already connected in blockchain. With the blockchain, I also not really understand about that because it is our team, different teams, more specific in this one, funny. But blockchain is possible to sell the data to another people or another company, but they save, they can look at the data, but not to change and then very safe the process. So in the processing, they have a database because the database from the supplier take a code, then they put every loin, every product. Then now the company can use this information to sell that. I think blockchain also in the future will be more.
Yeah.
I think just to add that there is actually blockchain requires that you publish all the data and not all companies are happy with having data, so I think there are regulations on what you can have that.
Yeah, great.
Just noting the graphs and everything else, where so many of the industries are very small in the processing industries. What is the benefit for them moving from paper systems? It's very evident and very large, like the example of tuna. But what about for these small organizations with 0 to 10 people? Is it actually profitable and worth their time going to those cases?
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to move on. I have the pleasure of introducing you to our very own Chris, Chris Garson, who's going to kind of take these concepts of traceability in the bigger supply chain, kind of bring it back to small-scale fisheries, and some of the lessons and challenges we've definitely come across. All right, Chris, over to you.
Well, thanks, Serge. So the title of my presentation is Out of Sight, Out of Mind. How much do we really know about where our seafood comes from, but more importantly, how much do we know about the seafood that we eat? I'm thrilled to say that in this room, and I see a couple of these floating around on the tables, there's some great tools to be able to give us exactly that answer. But by and large, this is still an issue in global seafood markets. So if you consider, like Eric mentioned in his talk, that the seafood market is increasingly global in nature. It's complex, it's diffuse. Approximately 40% of it enters the international trade. The United States alone, one of the largest seafood markets, imports up to 90% of its seafood. The EU, another major market, up to 70% of its seafood. So you can see as a destination market, the global trade in seafood is critical and very important. But what does it look like at the other end? Well, if you look at producer countries, specifically in the developing world, they produce up to 40% of the seafood that actually enters the global seafood market. And interestingly, the trade in fish and seafood for these developing world producer countries earns them significant revenue. In fact, I think it earns more revenue than some of the other primary food commodities. So if you had to take, and I'm just going to read off a list here real quick, coffee, bananas, rubber, tobacco, sugar, tea, and meat, and you combine them, it still doesn't earn as many hard dollars as what the trade in seafood does. So obviously trade in seafood is also critical at the supply end or at the producer end. So where to start looking if you want to start tracking this trade? So I'm going to stay a little bit global for now and pull it all the way back down to a real practical on-the-ground example. But the need for industry-driven global framework on seafood traceability was first surfaced at the World Economic Forum in 2013. And there was a Global Agenda Council for Oceans convened. So this forum was comprised of a number of industry stakeholders, NGOs, research institutions, and the like. And they highlighted that there was a need for a global framework, as I mentioned, in legal and traceable fish products. But I'm going to quote, the reason they said this was important was that the need was real and immediate, and its prompt initiation would contribute significantly to speeding and smoothing the transition to a world where wild-caught seafood is fully traceable to demonstrable legal fishing activities. Bit of an issue with that statement, and you'll see why a little bit later in my presentation. Subsequently, in 2015, this panel came out with a vision statement. So we seek a world in which all fishers, processors, traders, retailers, and consumers of wild-caught fish can be reliably assured that all fish products are legal and fully traceable. We envisage a global framework based on an adoption of combination of private sector and government mechanisms that ensures the legal governance and provenance and boat-to-plate traceability of fish products, thereby reducing incentives for illegal fishing while promoting socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable fisheries. So we're getting a little bit more of a holistic picture here, which is great to see. But why at that time this pressing need for traceability? Well, the issue of IUU fishing, so illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing activities had reached concerning proportions. So by its very nature, it's difficult to quantify or define IUU fishing. But at the time, it was approximated that up to 30% of the global catch came from IUU fishing. So that's approximately $23 billion worth of seafood in an industry which was valued at that time at $136 billion. That's according to the FAO in 2014. A subsequent study indicated that in the United States alone, IUU fishing made up to 20% of the seafood that was imported and consumed in the country. So it's clear to see that addressing traceability and transparency was critical at that time. But what does this mean for small-scale fishers? Well, let's break that IUU term down a little bit. For one, it's very difficult to have a discourse about illegal fishing when issues around recognition, rights, and access are still key challenges faced by small-scale fishers. Furthermore, how can we start to discuss unreported fishing activities when there are very few tools to support small-scale fishers in reporting catches and limited monitoring activities happening in the small-scale fisheries sector? And lastly, how does one begin to look at mapping unregulated fishing activities when in many instances small-scale fisheries are open access or the regulation mechanisms are extremely weak? So in this context, in the small-scale fisheries context, if traceability tools further marginalize and exclude small-scale fishers, then we need to rethink how we use them. And we need to explore ways in which traceability and transparency can drive positive transformation in small-scale fisheries supply chains. So now I'm going to sort of zoom back out. Is that the right word? No, zooming out, looking at it broadly. I'm going to zoom back into a real example on the ground here in South Africa. I'm going to talk a little bit about the West Coast rock lobster fishery. It contributes significantly to the South African economy. I think around, it fluctuates, but around 260 million rand per annum. But there are some serious issues. And I'm going to highlight a report done by Traffic, which did a trade data analysis of trade between 2000 and 2015. In this report, they looked at tracking how much was actually recorded as landed in South Africa, how much was recorded as exported, and how much was recorded in destination countries as imported. This was for all lobster species, but predominantly the species that's most prevalent in that is West Coast rock lobster. Shockingly, there was a difference between what we landed and what we exported in South Africa of over 600 tons. That was the average every year between 2000 and 2015. So we reported 602 tons less as legally landed than what we reported as legally exported. Critical issues. It got even worse when we looked at what was the difference between what we reported as legally exported and what was reported as legally imported by destination markets. That difference at times was as high as 929 tons. So just to put this into context in terms of the size of the fishery, the total allowable catch, or the TAC for that fishery in the subsequent season, so the 2015-2016 season, was 1,924 tons. So clearly, this IUU trade was a significant issue, and traceability and transparency were big problems. So what to do? Well, in South Africa last year, we thought that we could apply some of the traceability technology that we'd built through the various Abalobi platforms and work with a small amount, a handful of fishers really, to see whether or not we could map out and implement a fully traceable West Coast rock lobster supply chain. So starting to move fish from hoop net out at sea on the west coast of South Africa, all the way through to a local restaurant or local restaurants in the Western Cape to the plate that the consumers actually could enjoy. I'm going to move across here quickly and just show you, give you a broad overview of how that's done. And then actually I want to invite one of the participating fishers, David, to give us a little bit more of perspective from a fisher in terms of what it meant to work in this way and to implement something like this. So the fishers took trackers out to sea so that they can record and track all of their fishing activities. Critical in South Africa, West Coast rock lobster is fished in various zones, and you have to be fishing in the correct zone in terms of what your permit allows. Next, all of the catches were recorded, electronically recorded. Once they were recorded, they were verified at the harbour. So one could, and this was done by government officials, so that there was actually a verification point for the digital record that was created. This was then associated with a sealed container into which the West Coast rock lobster was packed, and then it was tracked for delivery. So the delivery driver moving from the landing site to the actual restaurant that bought the seafood was tracked in terms of time and route. The restaurant was then placed an order, and the amount that was ordered had to correspond with the amount that was recorded as landed, which it did, and that was checked by the chefs when they unpacked. As soon as they'd done that, they would verify that they bought that. This just shows you sort of the proportion of the different restaurants that bought it. So that's just a brief overview. I'm happy to answer any more questions about it, but I wanted to provide some context before I invited David up to speak a little bit more about this project. So, David, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear your perspective.
In South Africa, the lobster industry is very dodgy. And I operate under the interim relief dispensation, and that's more problematic. In terms of, we operate under a caretaker, which appointed by the department, and the caretaker dictates what happens and what must not happen. So, and with no real-time data from the government's side, it become more and more problematic. So landing slips are manipulated, illegal lobster are sold to buyers who exported it with the manipulated landing slips. So yeah, I took last season the decision to don't move in that direction anymore. And Abalobi creates a platform for me as a fisher to sell my lobster, my allocation directly to the chefs. And for me, it was more traceable and sustainable. And I do it simply not only for the big bucks involved, the better price, but for traceability, so that the consumer, the restaurants could see that this catch was a legal catch, and I am no longer connected with this, all this chaos and this illegal activities in the lobster industry. So data first is very important, especially in the lobster industry, because so much is happening on our landing sites. Lobster sold backdoor, and that lobster become legal. And the fishers the fishers didn't get the right price, and it is so manipulative that in the beginning of the season, they offer you a higher price. 2 weeks later, it drops 50%. So 300 Rand becomes 150 Rand, 120 Rand. And with a caretaker, which are created by actually the caretaker is supposed to be the voice of the small scale fisher, and the link between government and the fishers, but it becomes an activist for marketers, and yeah, they become agents for marketers, and the fishers don't rise to their full potential. And yeah, but I follow that route for, yeah, it's better price, traceability, but for me as a small scale fisher, maybe my dream, my goal is to export my own lobster and to move away from that chaotic system on landing sites in that type of thing. And so
So sometimes the system is so broken, you actually need to move outside of it to find some of the solutions. You need to pilot some innovation, and I think it's quite an important point. So there are great global platforms convening around traceability and legality in seafood. SALT is one. The Global Dialogue for Seafood Traceability is another. But I think in parallel, what needs to happen is we need to try new projects. We need to try new approaches. We need to learn quickly, fail fast if we have to. But I think that does need to happen in parallel with the more global work that's out there. And I just wanted to link back into this example and say that there were some significant challenges as well. David touched on a few, but I think there's 3 others that I'd want to highlight. So the first is that West Coast rock lobster on the South African market is red listed, and a very well-known seafood consumer guide. It focuses primarily on the ecological components. But how does one work with that in the market when you have a fisher like David employing a radically different approach to address a key issue in the fishery around transparency and traceability? It's quite a difficult thing to come to terms with, not only for a fisher like David, but also for chefs that would like to support these sort of things. So that was a key issue that was faced in this pilot. Second, verification at landing sites. This was problematic. It was really important in this to make sure that there was government verification of the catch at the landing sites. But quite often, in David and others' examples, they had to wait hours for these monitors to actually arrive, to record the catch, to log it and verify that it was actually there. This was a big problem. And then the third one I wanted to highlight was that we didn't quite get to reconciling the product in the restaurants. So ideally, we would have wanted to reconcile how much lobster the restaurants bought and how much they actually sold. But that'll be for this year's pilot. So that's it. I think it would be great if there's any questions for David, if you'd like to come up here again.
Thanks very much, Kristen and David. Any questions, any comments, any observations? Yeah, Andre.
Yeah, thanks for that. One of the claims about traceability we're hearing quite a lot is the ability to kind of ensure things are legal. But when you're in a situation, many of us experience, where it's very corrupt administration, I wonder whether it's ever really possible to create a kind of initiative which can guarantee something is not dodgy. I wanted to get your perspective on the I think what you can do is show people that your product is traceable. But it's very hard, I would have thought, to develop a system which is immune from an official who's going to take a lobster on the side or fiddle the books. I think sometimes it's a question, do we overestimate the power of ICTs in a very corrupt environment? And then that leads us to think about, well, what type of environments do we need to create where people are not in this chaos?
Yeah.
I can give you a broad answer to that. So the stats that I mentioned about the South African West Coast rock lobster, that study that was done by Traffic between 2000 and 2015, subsequent to that, a lot of loopholes have been closed in the market. A lot of that's about interoperability, looking at better trade data, reconciling what was landed and what was exported in a more efficient way. So that statistic has come down quite a lot over time since 2015. But I think for me, the big thing is these things need to happen in parallel. And I think you progress towards solving the problem incrementally instead of looking for a silver bullet that will solve everything. And so I don't know if it exactly answers your question, but I think the kind of tools and ICTs that you develop help to solve a problem, but don't necessarily solve it in its entirety. I think they have a huge role to play.
Christo, Greg?
Well, sure, I really want to commend Abalobi in a very sensitive topic on what they're doing. And I think one of the amazing things about ICT is that it gives people a voice that they haven't had before, being able to manage their own community and being able to start organize and say, okay, there is an avenue, perhaps, other than just following the official route through government, corrupt processes of distributing our catch, of gaining our income, and the more the community's awareness of this is raised, the greater self-organization will play a role, and ICT will facilitate that. But like you said, it's not so bullet, but it does empower people to realize that they can do it themselves. That's
Thanks, Christo. Greg?
I just want to make a comment between the link between Eric's presentation and yours, and an interesting factor like import. One little known fact, like import to the US, but often it's fish is caught in the US, processed in Asia, and then re-imported back. That's something that's quite often overlooked, the impact of the trade itself and activated fish, and what's called importation, and how that also plays and quite often missed out.
Hannah?
I really enjoyed the presentation. I struggled to put it in the context that I work in, because quite often the markets that myself and maybe a few others in this room working in the supply chain is maybe 2 kilometers in length, where fish land on the beach in the middle of nowhere and travel to maybe 3 or 4 villages and provincial capital nearby. What do you think the role of traceability plays in that kind of setting? Do you think it still has relevance?
It's such a difficult question to answer because it's all about context. So even in short supply chains, visibility could be a key issue. Return for your harvest could be a key issue. Quite often, pricing mechanisms are used to push risk down to the fisher level, right? So that it doesn't have to be aggregated into sort of the supply chain component of it. Even if it's very short, we see that happen. We've got multiple examples of that outside of the best fish of South Africa. So yeah, it really does depend. If by and large fishers are happy with the price they get and the visibility and their ability to engage with the market, they're probably less relevant. But sure, I think there's very few examples of that.
So Andrea, in our context here in South Africa, things like traceability, IUU and combating IUU and data collection have to really be, or even seafood guides have to be really deconstructed within the kind of the social political reality, the lack of recognition, rights issues, governance issues. And what we try to do with this particular pilot and kind of using this Abalobi platform is to kind of reconfigure traceability within a reconfigured supply chain and kind of use it as an opportunity for fishers, as Christo said, to try something different and slowly but surely build the confidence to try something different, first as individuals, then as a group of people. Because any small-scale fisher that I've ever spoken to about lobster is seriously concerned about the resource and the level of exploitation, but are very much locked into a particular arrangement almost outside of their control because of extremely powerful actors. So can we use relatively cheap, easy to use, almost do it yourself technology to slowly but surely kind of reconfigure that? Of course, we would need to do that as a much larger scale, but yeah, it was a proof of concept. Andre and then Philip.
You know, I think the message that's come across in your presentation today about dangers of interpretation of IUU fishing is something very big in our network.
Yeah.
We've worked on quite a long number of years, and just because something might be technically legal doesn't mean it's good, and vice versa. And that is a big issue in West Africa, where a lot of our work is focused.
Yeah.
Where licenses and quota allocations are very corrupt.
Yeah.
So I think there's a moral hazard in traceability.
Absolutely.
To say, oh, it's okay, the fish is traceable.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's caught by a really understanding method, and that person's the brother of the fisheries minister. You know, so I think that's really important.
Absolutely.
But I also think it's interesting, and I don't have the answer to this, but there are certain types of industries and certain sectors within fisheries and other industries where you just don't have the pressures for dishonesty. Where the community that are existing in that sector just seem to be able to have a lot more honest and open approach. Then you have business sectors which I would call crimogenic, where they're just so corrupt and everyone's at his throat. And in those situations, I don't think you can ever really have systems of checks and balances because there's so much incentive for dishonesty and rule breaking that traceability is going to really struggle. And I think at that point, you have to step back and say, hang on, there's something structurally wrong with the way the fishery works.
Of course.
And no, I think traceability can help individuals to get out of that situation, but it's not going to solve fisheries problem.
Philip?
Yeah, I was just wondering if anybody in this room that's involved in ICT and especially in the context of traceability had to face some resistance from the local fishermen, but not directly because of them, but because they were under the power of some gang leaders or drug dealers or whatever, that force them to, no, we don't want to be visible because we won't be able to sell our or be illegal, basically. And as an example, I had a friend who was working for them to the rice industry in the Dominican Republic, and she was fighting with all the farmers and improve their efficiency, so she had middlemen and so on. And she had
leave the country, the life was threatened. And because she was basically helping, small scale farmers, and that was going against some dealing that was going on, critical dealing and IPR, whatever, and she had to leave. So get to a point where possibility is good for the consumer and for sustainability of resources. But some agents, some people out there, I don't know if you can call them stakeholders.
Yeah. Yeah, we can tell you a few stories. I think we need to move on, although I feel we've just started with this. But we're going to have an afternoon to dive a bit deeper into these issues, these challenges. I want to hand over to Tracy, who's kindly agreed to facilitate the session for us up until lunch. Yeah, welcome, Tracy, and we're looking forward to this.
Should we raise the blinds a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think James is on lights.
Cool.
We're just going to do some more deep work before lunch, get our appetites up. We've got a couple slides here to cue you, but essentially we're going to be taking the topics that we went over today. So around gender, literacy, community management and feedback, and traceability and marketplace, and then apply those topics to the case studies that we learned about yesterday. So in India, Belize, Timor-Leste, and the multi-sites that Blue Ventures runs. So we've assigned a topic to each case study, and we're going to ask you each to self-select. So you can decide the topic you're most interested in, the case study, if they both align, and go into those groups to really dig into that topic within the case study. I want you to be open-minded. You may not think that a certain topic applies, like perhaps you didn't immediately see literacy as applying to the Indian case study, but think broadly as far as if it did, if this was an opportunity to dig into the topic more and see if it helps reach the broader goals of what was originally set out to achieve. So take a minute, take a look at what the case studies are, what the associated topics are, and then I'll cue you to the next steps.
What are the open groups?
Good question. So we realized that there's also a lot of great work happening amongst everyone here that didn't present. If you are working on anything related to ICT and you'd like to dig into some of these topics within your own work, I encourage you to form an open group. We're going to hopefully have no more than 2 open groups, but if in particular you've met others here and you want to dive into some work that each of you is doing that's complementary, perhaps around one of these topics, feel free to just form your own group and dive in from there. So does that make sense so far? Okay. So we're going to have the first group here. It's going to be led by each case study presenter. So the first group is going to be, let's say, there in the corner with the whiteboard. Second group we'll do over there by the wall. Third and fourth group, would this be too close in here to put them next to each other?
Here.
Maybe there. So we'll do 3 there.
We
4,
can use the other room.
4 there. Let's do the 5th group if we have an open group in the far room on the other side. And then if there's a 6th group, let's use the coffee area outside. And then, let's see. So these are some questions I want us to think through as we go through the case studies and dig into what we've learned this morning. So think about the tools that were presented. Each underscore there just represents your topic. So if you're looking at gender, apply gender to that question, literacy, etc. Think about the tools that you use that could be applied to the case study. Think about what resources may be lacking, and within that, how you could get those to come about within that case study. If there's an organization that could help, or a resource that you've learned about online that perhaps could be used. What opportunities are available? What challenges are present? And then, as I mentioned, how could addressing that topic help achieve the broader goals of the project? So if it doesn't directly relate, as you guys go through these questions, how do you see that addressing gender, etc., really does help the bigger goals of access to market or whatever was set out as the original broad goals of the case study? So we're going to leave these questions up in here and in the other rooms. Do they have these in that room? Okay.
Take a picture with your phone.
Yeah, take a picture if you're not going to be in this room. And these are meant to just be thought-provoking. Think through what you learned this morning, but really they're a jump-off point. If you have other things within the topics you want to dig into, we encourage group conversations. So we're going to take about 5 minutes to self-select and get into the groups that you'd like to be a part of. From there, we're only going to give you about another 5 minutes to ask questions. We'll have the presenters give a quick review of their case study, but we really want you to dig into these topics. So don't spend too much time on clarifying little details. Just try to do your best to get up to speed and then really dig into what you'd like to explore around gender literacy, feedback tools, whatever you're addressing in your case study. We'll have about 30 minutes total within each group to go through these questions and do some deep thinking, and then we are going to report out. So decide who's going to report out to the group. You'll have about 3 minutes to tell us what you discussed. So take notes amongst yourselves for preparation in that. But the point of this workshop is to really dig into practical work, what's been happening, and not to keep touching on hypotheticals. Think about what you're working on, what Julie and others are working on, and get into tangible next steps that they can do to better their work.
Can you show the groups again?
Sure, we'll go back. Trying to find it back, but so once again, we'll do group 1 in this far table, group 2 against that wall, group 3 over here by Chris's table. We'll do 4 in the far back corner, and then we'll have 2 open groups, 1 in the other room and 1 in the coffee area. So take a moment, think about what topics and case studies you'd like to work in, or as I mentioned, if you want to lead an open group, feel free to find some partners that you think would be helpful to dig in. Any questions? Yeah.
So the format is essentially that the group gives feedback to the case study presenter. Is that what it is?
You're going to go through your case study and decide how you could dig into the topic. So for instance, with literacy, you would go through the questions and think about what tools are available to address literacy within your case study, what are the challenges and opportunities. So if you are addressing it, there could be some feedback, and if you aren't, it's more of an exploration of what could be done.
Any other questions?
Cool. Yeah, so just take a second. Let's give about 5 minutes to move into the groups. And from there, like I said, I'll ask the case study presenters to give a quick overview and then just take a few more minutes to ask clarifying questions before you dig into the topic.
Does anybody have want to start their own group? Okay. Yeah,